I think anybody who is planning for retirement wants to get an idea of what am I going to need and what kind of statistic numbers are out there that can give me some guidance. And by the way, how is everybody else doing? So we gravitate towards averages and medians, and I think medians are a better average or a better number. Averages, you have some huge disparities, such as one of the numbers they give out is the average retirement savings at some ages. Well, for 35 to 39, they say the average is $48,710. Well, Mark Zuckerberg is 37, so you've got his wealth in there as well. And just like Tim Cook is in his 60s, so he's got more than 221,000 set aside, but his number is in there. So I think the median number is something that maybe you should look at. And so let's kind of look at the government statistics and see what the averages and the medians are, and then you can judge where you're at and see if you're doing okay. Also, the other thing you've got to understand in here, we all have different lifestyles. I think when you put down the number of what have we got, you have to also add that number, what does it cost us to live? And if the numbers don't match, I think the first thing you look at is how can we cut expenses? It's a lot easier to cut expenses than it is to increase income and thus increase savings. But if you'll cut the expenses, that goes directly to increased savings. So let's look at the numbers. The first numbers are what are the median retirement savings at ages. And you can see here they break it, the government breaks it down in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. I would be very surprised if the average American in their 40s has $63,000, particularly if this is per person. That would mean a couple would have somewhere in the neighborhood of $126,000. I would be surprised. Just again, using my life experience, I never really started saving for retirement until I got in my 50s. And what happened was I'm a baby boomer, and we were taught to generate cash flow. And when you generate cash flow, that gives you the opportunity to buy more stuff and better stuff. Bigger and better cars, bigger and better houses. Nita and I really never put anything aside until I was making some crazy money, and I had a very large tax bill due. And as a financial advisor, I knew that I could only put $56,000 that year. Actually, that would have given us the ability, if I had had a subchapter or a subchapter S or an LLC, which I didn't, and which was shameful. In fact, I could have only put $12,000 aside. That was what the allowance for an IRA was, and times two. So I had to create a defined contribution plan, and that was I set up my own pension plan. And since I was in my 50s, I was making well over $300,000 a year, I was allowed to put enough in a pension to eventually generate enough money to give me an income in retirement of $300,000. So I was able to drop $200,000 into a defined benefit plan at that time. That was really the first savings that we did. Other than that, we went on wonderful vacations, drove beautiful cars, and lived in big houses. So these numbers, they're difficult to deal with. Let's look at the averages, though. The average retirement savings, and this is where I say they get all blown out of proportion because of the The numbers of Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Tim Cook, and Mark Zuckerberg are in there, amongst many others. And then you have some people who have nothing. So averages don't mean a whole lot to me, but here they are. Then you go, then that government puts out what is the recommended retirement savings by age. And what they're saying is that if you're in your 30s, you should have 1 to 2 times your annual salary. Now, what they don't say is that for a couple or is that for an individual? But let's assume that it's a couple, and they tell us that the average, I looked this up, the average income for a 30-year-old in the United States is $45,000. Times 2, that's 90. That would mean for an American couple in their 30s should have $90,000 to $180,000 set aside for retirement. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think it, I think it's, I don't know where they come up with these numbers. And then if you're in your 50s, it's saying your average salary is $55,000. So again, if there's 2 of you, that's 110 times 6. You should have $660,000 set aside in your 50s for retirement. I hope you do. And some of you will. We just did a video where an individual had over $3 million in his retirement programs, but he had multiple opportunities, and he was a high-wage person. He was making $180,000 a year. That's substantial. So I ask you to look at these numbers, but don't get caught up in trying to keep up with the Joneses. I think the better number of what is it going to take you to live in your retirement is to know what your expenses are. To know if you're going to have your house payment down. That's a big one. If you go into retirement and you don't have a mortgage and you don't have a car or a pickup truck payment, you're down to your utilities and your food and your entertainment. And that can be very controlled. You can, again, I go and visit my son, who has 2 daughters and a young man who lives with them, and their refrigerator isn't big enough. They couldn't buy a big enough refrigerator for all the food that they have to have in their house. I look at our refrigerator, we just got a new one, and there's not a lot of food. So it doesn't take a lot to feed a retired couple. It's the extracurricular things that you do. I was just talking to a retired couple who said they were going to buy a 5th wheel. And he asked me, what do I think about that? I said, rent it. I said, you're going to run the wheels off of that 5th wheel for the first 2 years, and then you're going to wish you didn't own it. So rent it and just let somebody else take care of it. So I think it's all about controlling expenses. And then we look, what is the average in a 401k? I assume these numbers are correct because 401ks, they can go to the companies that handle the 401ks. And so here you have a good idea. So people in their 50 to 59 have roughly $160,000 in their 401k. I would suspect if you recognize that, particularly if there's a company match, that you should be doing the company match, you can accumulate $160,000 in your 401k. And that would then match up very close to the first number we looked at, and that was the median retirement savings for a 60-year-old was 172, and here it's saying for a 60-year-old, the average retirement savings are 182. And again, that's average as opposed to median. So those numbers are probably pretty accurate. So that gives you an idea. The only caution I would give you on this is we all live different lifestyles. I bought my wife a Porsche. I'm sure you didn't. I bought myself a BMW 535i. I've got $200,000 worth of depreciating assets sitting in my garage that requires somewhere in the neighborhood of $15,000 a year of support through gasoline, oil changes, maintenance, insurance, and taxes. So my lifestyle is different than yours. I hope yours, you recognize that, yeah, your goal was to generate cash flow, but unlike me, you didn't spend all of it on stuff. I now have a house, a big house full of so much stuff that I don't know what's going to happen to. So that's another problem that I have. But we're not hoarders. We just got involved in buying antiques and buying art and displaying our wealth. A mistake that I have learned from, too late, okay? But the other side of it is I have an attitude that I can always make more money. I'm a creator. I do this. I write books, and I enjoy it. I have found my passion in retirement. I did not find my passion in my working years. And that was truly my fault. Or the education system. I'm dyslexic, so I couldn't read, so I wasn't a good student, but I figured out later how to get things done, and how to get around the fact that I can't read. Right now, I'm a lifelong member of Audible. They send me at least one book every month that I can read. Because the other thing that I've learned in life is that if you want to separate yourself from the masses and make an extraordinary living, educate yourself, because nobody else is. I would say 89% of the people in this world stop reading when they graduate from their last level of education. And if they do read, they read fiction. Whereas I read nonfiction. I want to learn. I kind of played with the idea, or laughed at the idea, that Warren Buffett, I think he charged somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 million for a lunch. And someone paid him. You can buy every book that Warren bought or has written and probably spend 40 hours reading them for probably less than $100. So you go to the library and you can do it for nothing. The knowledge is out there. And if you will read and educate yourself and then focus, and stay relentlessly focused on one thing, what your passion is, you'll excel. So those are your averages, those are your medians, that's what the government is saying. But you run your life and make this, your retirement, the best of your life. You can do that if you'll just focus. Find your passion and then share it. That's what I'm doing. And it's going pretty. I think I've mastered retirement. Okay, wanted to share those numbers with you. But remember, the average, if you're a 55 to 59 years old and you don't have $223,493 set aside, and that's the average. Remember, Jeff Bezos' numbers are in there, and he's in the billions. Talk to you again soon.